Hey folks, welcome to this episode. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can earn a living making instructional videos for martial arts and self-defense. Now, where does this episode come from? It's been a little bit bizarre with my schedule these last few months, basically, due to a variety of circumstances. But if you go back to episode 95, I talked about how you can actually make a living writing books about these topics, which is something that I've done for a long time now. I've also done instructional videos and a bunch more. So I promised back then that I would do separate episodes digging deeper into these individual topics, and that's what I'm doing. In the meantime, there have been a bunch of interviews and other episodes that I wanted to get basically out of the way first because long story short, and again, go to the podcast page on my site wimsblog.com. You can see all the previous episodes in which I interviewed people about living in difficult circumstances, in particular with winter in Europe on the way back then, but it has arrived as of basically this week. We are in freezing temperatures where I live and in many other countries in Europe as well. So a lot of people were worried, and I wanted to give some information that could be helpful. That's what I did. So now I'm going to refer you to those episodes if that's what you're looking for. But for now, I'm going to continue with my series on how to earn a living, basically doing what we love, meaning martial arts and self-defense. Obviously, there's going to be a bunch more interviews as well, but that's going to be the main focus of the episodes in which I'm talking, as opposed to the interviews and You Are Not Aries episodes, which are short form. So all that out of the way. I'm going to talk about the way I like to do things and my experience. That is not universal. Different instructors have different methods of teaching, and that is perfectly fine. You'll find different producers and publishing houses that bring out instructional videos. They will have their own way of doing things. I'm going to try to explain a lot of details that can help you if you're just getting started, or if you're already making instructional videos, then hopefully this will help you too. I'm going to post a lot of links to everything that I'm talking about here. So go to the page linked in the description of wherever you're listening to this, or if you're watching on YouTube, that's also going to be in the description. It's typically wimsblog.com / and then the number of the episode. That's always the way I like to do these links. And it will take you to a page where all the products and other things that I mention during this episode will be easy for you to view. It's going to be a lot. So I'm not going to always mention it, but you know where to look for that stuff specifically. Now, I'm also not going to talk about marketing and, for instance, membership sites, which is linked to video, because I want to do that for another episode. I will talk basically about the how-tos of making instructional videos. How can you do that, and how can you do a good job, hopefully, of getting a quality product that people will want to buy. Now, first off, there's mine. The first videos I did was with Paladin Press. Sadly, Paladin Press is no longer with us. The company basically disbanded after the owner passed away a few years ago. But that was my first experience with a professional studio and publishing house. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to do that correctly, and that basically helped me get started when I independently published instructional videos, which I've also done, but also a lot of the stuff that I do on social media when it's videos. Um, my experience working with professionals helped me out tremendously, and that is what I want to share with you here. Now, as an aside, because I just mentioned social media, I will not talk about social media videos like YouTube, Facebook, and so on. Those are specific things. I'm talking today about instructional videos. You're teaching something and you're going to sell that video. That is the goal. So let's get started with some basics. Who should be teaching instructional videos? Let's start with that. Or put it in another way, are you qualified to be making and selling instructional videos? Is that something you should do or not? Well, That's a difficult question to answer, but it's important because we have a saying over here in my country: many are called, but few are chosen. And this applies to many things. A lot of people often think that they're the right person for a specific job, but they aren't necessarily. And this is readily apparent when you go to YouTube, for instance, and you see some people putting instructional videos out there. And again, I'm not putting them on blast, but sometimes it's clear that they haven't really trained for a long time. And again, there's nothing wrong with that per se, only that it's going to be difficult to sell that if you're a beginner. Well, you don't have a lot of experience and knowledge just yet. Maybe a few years later down the line, yes, but not at first. So try to be honest with yourself. Try to assess your own skill level and then make a determination whether you think it's a good idea for you personally to make instructional videos or not. It's to each his own. I'm not going to fault anyone for doing this or say like, okay, well, you've trained for 30 years, so for sure you would be the perfect person to make such a video. That's also not necessarily the case, but you have to have some baggage basically of experience and knowledge to share. Otherwise, what will you be instructing? My personal opinion, and this is just to give you kind of a baseline level, I think you'd have to be training for at least 5 years in whatever system or style that you want to share before you can start teaching, whether it's in class, but also whether it's in instructional videos. I would wait for at least 5 years. I think 10 years would be better, but it's hard to pin down. And many of the reasons why, I mean, the main reason why is because there's such a huge amount of information available already from people who have a lot of experience. So you have to look at, well, what do I have to contribute at that point when there's so many people out there? Well, you've got your own personal experience, which is going to be different from that of others. And your unique point of view can be very valuable. But you have to develop that point of view first. Having an opinion is not enough. It needs to be an informed opinion and one that can basically withstand a minimum of scrutiny and criticism, because you're going to get criticism. Now, and people may disagree with you, but at the very least, you have to make sense. It needs to be something that is coherent. And typically that tends to come only after you've spent a fair amount of time training. So again, the 5 to 10 year limit is something that is my personal opinion. You don't have to follow it. Will be exceptions. For instance, if you've been competing in the UFC at age 18 and you compete for a few years, well, you've only been a competitor professionally for a few years maybe, but you do have a very specific type of experience that a lot of people don't have, and you can instruct that, for instance. So again, don't stay focused on the 5 or 10 years that I mentioned. Focus more on what have you learned in the meantime, and is it worth sharing, and are you the right person for the job? Again, some people think I'm full of it and I shouldn't be teaching, and that's perfectly fine. I disagree, but that is fine. And again, people will hate your guts for publishing something. You can't please everybody, but you have to make sense though, as I said. So that's one thing. Another point, YouTube basically killed the instructional video market. Not completely, but to a large degree. Why? Well, before YouTube got really popular and streaming video was what it is now, there weren't that many titles available. There wasn't that much content that you could buy. And we went from that scarcity to basically an unending avalanche of information, of instructional content that is at your fingertips, in your phone, wherever you want. So that's a very different marketplace than when I got started. There's so many free videos that a lot of people are now unwilling to buy. So you do have an uphill battle if you're starting out with instructional videos. Know that up front so you don't get disappointed, and that you can make an informed decision as to whether you want to put time, effort, and money. It's not going to be fully free. Somebody will have to pay for certain things. That you're willing to take up that battle. So think about that first. Now, as an addition to that, if you already have a following online, it can work. If you've been publishing your blog, if you've been active on social media for a while, and you've got a bunch of people following you, several thousands or 10,000s or more, doesn't matter exactly how much it is, well, then you might actually have a platform and an audience already for you to sell something. Not necessarily so, but it's possible. So I'll give you an example. You could also be a competitor. The best example that I can give is Gordon Ryan, who's basically, I think we can make the case that he's the best grappler in the world right now, talking about BJJ. He makes a lot of money, so he claims, and I believe him, selling his videos. So every year, pretty much, he seems to be putting out instructional videos showing exactly what he does in competition. And because he's so good, everybody wants to buy that. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And his videos tend to be, you get a lot of information for them, but it can be a few $100s easily if you buy some of his stuff. So it's not necessarily cheap to buy, but there's a lot of content in these videos, and it's from somebody has a proven track record. So if that is you in whatever martial art or self-defense system that you work in, if that's something that is relevant to you, you have that kind of background, you have that track record, you might make a fair amount of money just selling your instructional videos. Again, it's not a given. Just having a good fight record is not enough. You need to be a good instructor as well. You need to know how to work on camera, and I'll talk about that later. But that might work. So my overall point that I want to basically drill down a little bit into is that if you're completely starting from scratch, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be very difficult to earn a living or just recoup your costs to begin with. That's going to be hard. So think about that. Maybe you want to build up a fan base, so to speak, first before you start instructing. Maybe you want to do more on social media first, and I'll talk about that in a future episode. But maybe you want to just jump in and do it right away. It's up to you, but I would recommend taking your time to basically have the platform first and then start offering products, unless you found this niche that is totally underserved in the market. This is a very specific thing that nobody else is talking about, but many practitioners and students are actually looking for. If you can find that, go right ahead. Then and I'd be interested to know what that is. So let me know. Right. So that's basically okay. Who should make instructional videos? Let's move on to, well, what will that be about? So you need an ID. My position on IDs is that there's plenty of them out there. It's rare that I'm out of ideas to make a video about, write about, or make a podcast episode about. It's extremely rare. Typically, I don't have the time. I don't have enough time to follow up on all the ideas that I have. That is true, in my opinion, for most people. What could your instructional video be about? Well, anything that comes up in training, in competition, or in fights, when you compete, or in self-defense situations from your experience. It could be something you see online. It could be a question somebody asks of you, or a comment you read somewhere or somebody makes. And that just gives you an idea. And like, well, this could be interesting. For instance, I work on Patreon. Patreon is a membership site, and again, I'll talk about membership sites in a different episode. But somebody asked, could you do something about pre-attack indicators? I'm like, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that, and that series was going for a long time. I did a lot of videos about that. instructional videos on how to use pre-attack indicators or defend yourself against them. So it could be a bunch of IDs. Whatever they are, write them down, make a list, always. Now, I know some people see this differently. They're like, well, if the ID isn't really good, it's not going to stick anyway. Sure, maybe for you, but I like to be organized, and I think that you don't necessarily want to discard an ID right away. You want to give it time. And if you're like, well, no, after thinking about it for a few days, you decide that I don't want to make a video with that ID, don't throw it away, create a special file that you write down all these kind of IDs in, and then you organize them in such a way that, for instance, I've got a file called graveyard, which is discarded IDs, discarded things that I don't think I'm ever going to use. But every now and then I go over them and then that list again. And very often there's one that pops out and that I think of, well, if I combine this ID with this other thing that I was thinking about, that could work. And it's not a given that it will work, but then you've got something that you might be onto something then. So I would very much suggest keeping track of your IDs and being organized. And again, not being organized is going to be difficult if you want to make instructional videos. You're going to have some level of organization and structure because otherwise the viewers will not connect with what you're doing and the video shoot will be horrible for you. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's assume you've got this ID. Right, great. Okay. How do you know this will sell? How do you know somebody will be interested enough into buying a video of you explaining that? You don't. So do research. There's a big internet out there. There's search engines. Do research. Look up if somebody already made a video about that. And if it's a good video, write down what makes it good. If it's a bad video, write down what you think you could do to make it better. But start basically creating a map of the environment that ID lives in, like everything that is involved with that. If you do find a video, look at the comments, look at the reviews, see the questions that people ask, see what they like, what they don't like, what they think should have been here in the video but wasn't, and so on. And use that information to fine-tune your ID. And once you've done a bit of research, and again, you can go too far with these kind of things. You can spend months on research and not do anything. You have to put yourself on a limited time budget with these kind of things, obviously. But once you've done your research, start writing an outline. Now, at first, you're just going to brain dump everything on the paper. So you're going to do a brainstorming session and you just write down every single thing you know about that topic. Don't have to write in full paragraphs and sentences. Don't care about spelling mistakes and neat paragraphs. Just get it out of your head on the screen or on the paper as quickly as you can. And just keep going until you don't think of anything anymore. You can repeat that exercise several times until you've got a lot of information. And in many cases, you'll figure that when you first had your ID, for instance, I made a video about, and I wrote a book about heavy back training because it's something that's dear to me and I really like doing, and a lot of people found that interesting as well. As I started writing the outline, it just became bigger and bigger because everything I wrote down gave me an ID for something else. And that is something that you can often experience. And if you don't find that right away, keep trying. Ask people to help you. Look at what people are doing on a heavy bag. How does that give you ideas of something that you could add to your project? Maybe something that you have a different take on a specific drill or exercise that somebody else is doing in his video. So that is something that you want to do first. You do that big data dump and you have to keep going until you have a decent amount of content there. Now, when you have that, you start structuring your outline. You start basically pouring it into a structure that is coherent. Start with an introduction and the basics, and then you go step by step to explain everything else. so that there is a way for the audience to just follow along and everything is coherent. It's not just a random mess of things. I'll link to an outline that I used for my latest instructional video was basic self-defense tips. That was the latest one on self-defense. I've done a few other ones in recent years, but this one might be easiest for people to understand because it's a relatively short video. It's not several hours. I've got longer ones, and that will give you an idea then, especially if you bought that video from me, you will recognize what is on the screen with what I write in the outline. An outline is not a script. An outline is basically the highlights, the points for every scene that I am doing for that video, but it's not verbatim. I don't read from a script when I teach these kind of things. Some people do that. They have instructional videos that they make with a fully written out script, word for word. I think it often becomes very wooden and stiff, the way people talk like that. And I know some people who did it and did it fairly well, but it takes a fair amount of practice and good acting skills, I think, to pull that off. That's not me. I also think it kills creativity a little bit. So that is something that you do then. You create an official outline. And again, look at the one on the show notes for this page, for this episode, sorry, on the page on my website. The link is in the description. And there will be a link to my outline for Basic Self-Defense Part 1. So you've written your outline. Before you can finalize the outline, and some people do this first. I like to do it after, but you can do it any way you like, and that is determine the target audience. Now, for instance, basic self-defense, that video is for beginners, people who have no training. But hardcore heavy back training, that video I did is for people with a few years experience. If you haven't done anything just yet, learn some techniques first and then start working with a heavy back. So these are very different instructional videos for different target audience. You can adjust your your outline accordingly depending on who you are aiming this video at. And that is important. If you are aiming at people with many years of experience, black belt level training, well, you're going to show different things than for the beginners and vice versa. So having a clear idea of who you're aiming this at is going to be critical. Now, bear in mind that you won't be able to please everybody. As I've said before, people will always get upset with you and think your video is trash simply because it didn't have what they wanted to be in there. Or they just don't like you. That happens as well. But it's going to be easier to please more people if you have a focused product and then you tell people before buying what the product is doing, what your video is about, and who it is for. So keep that in mind. Another aspect is the length of the video. Now, the longer your video, the more difficult it will be technically to do it. Now, what does that mean? Well, you're going to have a large video file that will either people will have to download it or stream it on a platform that they use to view it. You're going to need a more powerful computer to edit and render the video. And it might make more sense actually to split your video projects into separate volumes, which is what I've done with my Combat Sancho series. So before you have this huge video project that, because of your awesome and incredible outline, but it's 20 pages long, well, focus on what is essential information, discard the rest. And if it's your first project, maybe start with something smaller, or at the very least start with volume 1 and then add more volumes as you get more experience. The length of the video also is something that you have to see in light of your long-term plans. For instance, is there a logical progression from the videos that you want to sell to people? In my example, the Combat Sancho series is a full curriculum for self-defense. But for instance, my power control video is about making techniques more effective, whether from Combat Sancho or something else, your own style. The Batman and heavy bag videos, they help you train techniques that you learn in the Combat Sensor series or in your own style, either with a partner or for solo training. And then I have my flexibility video, which is also an addition to that. It helps you become better at the techniques. So in conclusion, I have videos that will show you either a system, a self-defense system, or I have videos who show you how you can train better. So that changes the type of videos that I make. There's basically two categories of videos that I sell online. And if you have a long-term plan like that, it can create clarity as to the length of the video that, for whatever project you're working on, is best suited. Now, a final aspect of this is that you can and you should charge more for longer videos. Do you want to do that? If you're not Gordon Ryan, you can't ask $150 or more for your video. Well, maybe you have to think about that first. It's going to depend on your marketing, on your business approach. But for instance, for me, I want my videos to be reasonably priced and offer lots of information. I very much disagreed with Paladin Press back in the day when they priced my videos very, very high. I asked them repeatedly to lower the price, but they never really did. So I thought that was a mismatch with what people were looking for. Interesting content maybe, but way too overpriced. Well, what I did as soon as I got the videos back, I got the rights back when Paladin stopped working, is I changed the price. I lowered it significantly. So for instance, my longest video is Batman, and it costs $30 for 6 hours and 70 minutes of content. So that's a lot. That's a long, long, long video. I think it's a pretty good deal. On the other hand, you've got my shortest video, which is a resistant band full home body workout. And that is $15 for an hour and 7 minutes. I think it's also a great deal. It's much cheaper, but you don't get as much content. So how you view the project, the length of your instructional video is going to determine the price that you set. The price that you set will determine which audience you get, how easy it is for people to buy your stuff. If you have a 10-hour video and you're selling it at $5, it's going to be difficult to make a lot of money with it. Maybe it'll sell well, but it's not going to be that easy. So these are all things to consider before you start basically recording. Now, there's another aspect, and that is you have to think in visual terms for everything you put in your outline. What would it look like on the screen? Whether it's a computer screen, TV screen, a tablet, or cell phone screen, what would it look like? For instance, very often you have to do an introduction and some explanation, okay? But you standing there talking at the camera for 20 minutes straight is boring. Try to avoid that. Now, I am guilty of doing longer explanations sometimes. It's just unavoidable. But try to minimize that as much as you can. And to get an idea of the visuals of instructional material, just take your laptop or your computer, fire up your webcam, and watch yourself as you explain and demonstrate what is in the outline. You're very quickly going to see what works for the viewer and what doesn't. And I'll talk more about that below when I talk about camera angles and the like. But practice that first and then see, well, do I even have a way of showing this well in an instructional video? Maybe it's difficult. Like certain things will be hard to do. And I'm going to link to a blog post that I wrote a long time ago about learning techniques from video, part 3. And I talk about that and in detail. You can watch an old video of mine, and it's about an arm bar. And there's pressure only at the elbow or from the shoulder towards the elbow as I'm sliding in. These are 2 ways in which I can do the arm bar differently. Well, that is hard to see on video. I have to do a really close focus, zoom in, sorry, and a tight shot and show at a very specific angle so that people can understand that as I explain it. In a video that I made online, that was never the goal. It was just a basic instructional video to show something, and I didn't want it to be like 30 minutes long. So understand that some things don't translate well on the screen, but are easier to explain in writing, and vice versa. And that's going to take a little bit of figuring out for you to do as well. So as you write your outline, don't just assume that it's going to make for good footage in video. Test it out first. Speaking of testing, practice. Practice a lot. There's very few people who are naturally good at this. I for sure wasn't. I remember my first day at Impress trying to talk to the camera, and it's a little bit intimidating at first, and I did practice a lot, but when it's the real thing, it's still not the same. So I pretty much sucked at it at first, but I got better slowly, bit by bit. So practice. The more you practice, the easier it will be. Now, how do you practice? Like I said, put on your webcam and record it. And why is that important, a webcam? If you've got a laptop, it's great. If you've got a desktop, you're going to have to figure out if you can stand in front of it. But if you've got a webcam and you've got a screen of your laptop that you can watch yourself as you're demonstrating, you can practice that way, and you can see what does it look like on the TV screen, on the video screen, as you are demonstrating what you're doing. You've got immediate feedback. Now later, I would suggest practicing in front of your cell phone, whether it's on a stand or a tripod, and, or you can use a camera if you've got one that you're going to use for the shoot. But practice that way as well, so you get used to not having that display in which you can see yourself. So you have to practice in a way that you have to visualize internally what the viewer will see as you are creating that instructional material. It's different. It sounds the same as using the webcam with your laptop screen on, but it's not the same. So practice that as well. All that practice will eventually lead to adjusting the outline. Now, view your outline as a process, not a finished product the first time you finish writing it. What you want to do is practice, and as you do so, find better ways to do certain things. And disregard parts that you figure out, well, that was a good idea on paper, but it's not really translating well on the screen. I'm going to skip that. And you keep going until you're pretty sure it's good enough. Now, it's never going to be perfect. You will never be 100% happy. I look back at many of my instructional videos and I cringe at some of the things that I see there. But that's just going to be something you'll have to accept. But do adjust your outline with the information that you get from practicing. That's very important. Same thing applies to your demo partner if you need one. You have to teach him how to work in front of a camera and do the things in a way you want. Being a good demo partner is not easy. Not everybody is suited for that. So if you need a demo partner, practice with him as well. So that's a lot of preparation. And now we get to the video shoot. Okay, the nuts and bolts of doing a good video shoot for instructional content, it starts with location. You need a background wherever you're going to record. Okay, preferably not a fully white background. If it's completely white, you will often have shadows, and shadows make for very annoying artifacts on the screen. Basically, it distracts the viewer. So try to avoid a background that is fully white or a flashy color. Again, the links are in the show notes, and you can look at the background in my Paddle Impress videos. You will see that it's either bluish or blue-gray, and they have kind of like swipes of different kind of colors, kind of cloudy effect that they got. Why? Because it doesn't mess with the lighting, and it's easy to put a lot of people with moving body parts, punching, kicking, throwing, and so on, in front of that background, and it contrasts well. At the same time, you want to have clothes that contrast with that background, that not clothes in a color that scream at you from the screen, not bright yellow, flashy stuff. And a free tip, no stripes on your clothing. That looks horrible on the screen. No stripes at all. If you watch my videos, typically, I will have a dark blue t-shirt or a light gray one, and I will wear either black pants or shorts or something along those lines. Why? Because these colors tend to contrast well with the backgrounds that I use. And same thing is true for your partner. He needs to be wearing clothes that don't scream at the screen and distract the viewer from what you're showing. Um, it's easy to avoid this kind of stuff if you think it through just a few minutes before you start recording. If you don't think about it and then afterwards you do a full day video shoot and then you notice that, oh my God, that bright green t-shirt that my partner's wearing, it doesn't work. It's annoying as hell. Yeah, it's too late. You have to start over. So I'm a big fan of doing test footage first with your training partner at the location you're going to go at and reviewing it before you actually start recording. So we have background of the location, next light. Okay, natural light is annoying. Why? Because it changes constantly. So just using sunlight and daylight, it's not necessarily a great solution. You want to have light that you can control. If there's already a lot of different light sources there, hard cold light can make you look sickly and weird on the screen. So soft warm light is better. I use soft boxes to manage lights, and I'm using them right now as I record this. And basically, you need a minimum of 2 light sources so you can control the light, the shadows, and so on. And getting rid of shadows is key. It's important because these are very annoying things to on the screen, especially if you move fast and people are distracted by the shadows on the wall. It's very annoying. I've got an article in the show notes talking about that, how to get perfect lighting video. It's not as easy as it seems. You have to experiment a little bit, but it's important because if the quality of your footage is low because of poor lighting or uneven lighting, people won't buy it. They won't. If you ever have the chance to go to a video studio or recording studio for TV or video, what have you, you will see a truckload of lights just to control the lighting and to make the people on the screen look good. Next up, we have the sound, so background light and sound. And this one is critical as well. You will be instructing, so you will be talking. People have to listen to you for a long time. Now, what you have to understand is that you can edit sound in your video afterwards, but you can't fix everything. It's difficult and it's time consuming also to edit sound. So I would try to avoid it. Get it right from the beginning and you don't have to waste all that time and energy on fixing it. And sometimes you won't be able to fix it. Bear in mind that people won't want to pay for videos that have barking dogs or screaming children in the background. So you need to have a relatively soundproof location where outside sound doesn't come in. Another point is echo and sound quality. So if you have a lot of hard surfaces like I do here where I'm recording this, and this is one of the most difficult parts for me to recording the podcast, it's that the soundproofing is very difficult because of the way my attic, the attic here, has been built. The high roof makes it very difficult to soundproof it. I'm working on a solution, but it'll take some time. If you do video recording in a place with a lot of hard surfaces, that's going to create echo and this kind of metallic hard sound that is very annoying to listen to. So try to avoid those as well. Speaking of sound quality, use a good microphone. Nowadays, cell phone cameras, for instance, have great cell phones have great cameras, sorry, so you can record video with them. But the microphones are very small and they're usually not that great. Now, I have a list of microphones in the show notes, and there's one specifically for cell phones that I've used. I like Rode. Rode is not the cheapest brand, but I think price value is pretty good. But you have to check if your phone has a headphone jack, because that's what that Rode mic needs to be used in a cell phone. And I used that for years and it worked quite well. There's also a microphone that they have for camcorders and DSLR cameras, so the digital cameras, the bigger ones. I like those as well. And for some things, like for the basic self-defense video, I used a lavalier microphone, which is the ones that you see, for instance, in interviews with people, that they have a small microphone pinned on their chest, and there's a thread, a little cable going inside their jacket or inside their shirt that it is attached to this sending unit, and there's a receiver unit on the camera typically. And that gives really good quality typically. Takes some experimenting, but it gives typically good quality. In particular, if you're at a location where you cannot control sound well, for instance, outside locations. These lavalier microphones tend to pick up not only the voice of the person speaking, but quite well. They're pretty good at not picking up all the other sounds that might be distracting. That's expensive. You've got cheap alternatives to the filmmaker, the Rodelink filmmaker that I use, but I would avoid buying cheap crap. It never works as well, and you typically, if you are serious about making videos, you're gonna have to buy better stuff in the end anyway, and then you wasted your money. So that's that. Moving on, next thing, and I know this gets technical, but trust me, if you get this stuff right before you start recording, you understand all this and you practice this, it makes everything so much better in the end. So let's talk about camera shots. There's an article that I put in the show notes talking about it's called The Ultimate Guide to Camera Shots. It's a great article. It explains all the concepts that you need to understand to make high quality videos that are clear and easy to watch. I'm not going to go over everything. Read the article. It's not that long, it's not that complicated. But first up is camera angles. Now, this is critical. If you're new to making videos, you have to learn about camera angles. Camera angles will either make something very clear, or they will make something very difficult to understand, and they might actually distort what you want to show. If you have, for instance, a low camera angle, you film from very low and you point the camera up, you have a very, very different view from vice versa when you put the camera high and you point it downwards. So these are two basic examples of different camera angles. Try to also incorporate the right size. What does that size mean? Is basically how close do you come to the subject that you're recording. For instance, I mainly use shoulder level shots. If you're watching me on YouTube, what you're seeing is a shoulder level shot. You see my head and basically, my chest or a little bit below the chest. So I'm going to sit up a little bit straighter so you can see it. Okay, if you're watching on YouTube, that's a shoulder level shot. For a lot of the talking, that is typically a good idea. But for the a medium close-up is also possible. I'm sorry, I'm mixing them up a little bit, but a medium close-up is what we're doing now, and then a full shot or a medium full shot is what you do for the instructional parts. A full shot is basically from head to feet, you can see me. That is important. Why? Well, because, for instance, if you show footwork, people will have to be able to see your feet in the technique, how they move and so on. And if you're doing too tight a shot, it won't be visible. So try to figure out what will work best for you, for what you're showing. For instance, if you do grappling, well, you're both lying on the ground. The framing will and the camera angle will be very different from when you do stand-up. Let's say you do a self-defense video or a karate video where you're both standing up, you and your partner. Camera angle is going to be different, size is going to be different. So again, shoulder shot is when you place the camera at about shoulder height when you're standing, and that is typically a good angle because it doesn't distort the image too much. For most martial arts and self-defense related topics, that's going to work well. And then you basically zoom in and out a little bit depending on showing certain details and showing the overall picture. With Paladin Press, we had easily 3 cameras. We had an overhead camera filming straight down, and we had a camera who did a wide shot, and then the other camera would zoom in more depending on what was being shown at that time. That's not something that I have the luxury of using right now. I don't have 3 cameramen to work with me, but there's a way in video software editing that you can work around that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So before we move on to the equipment, one more point, and that's framing. That means composition. Um, Composition means where do you place the elements that matter in the shot. For instance, if it's one person, like me talking, you put that person in the middle of the screen and try to fill the screen as much as possible with that person. It's easy to watch them. If it's you and your demo partner, well, typically you would both have your half of the screen, one left, one right, and then showing the action in the middle. These are just examples, but framing is important. If you're out of frame, somebody's half out of frame, what people need to see is not in frame. It's going to be very, very difficult to get good reviews on your instructional video. So that's camera shots. Okay. So next point, equipment. Very important aspect. If at all possible, record in 4K, so ultra high definition. Why? Because then you can zoom in your software without losing too much quality. So that means that when you do zoom in on your camera, the camera that you're using, make sure that you're using optical zoom, using the lens itself, as opposed to software zoom, which is different. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but that's important. So check if it's optical zoom when you zoom in, but do record in 4K. Very important. And nowadays, that's not that much of a big deal anymore. Most cell phone cameras can do it right away. You can use a cell phone camera to film instructional videos. I've done it before, and there's actually movies that have been made with iPhones, Hollywood quality movies. You'd be surprised. I think it was Steven Soderbergh who did a movie just filming with iPhones, and that was years ago. So I use a Samsung Galaxy S21 Plus. I'm very happy with it, and it has a great camera, and then it's just a matter of sound. If you want to use a dedicated camera, I have a Panasonic Lumix G7. It's not a very recent camera, but it's an older model, but that means that it's not as expensive anymore. I was fortunate that this was just given to me by one of my patrons, and I've used it, and it works great. You can record in 4K for about up to 10 minutes at a time, and the quality is great, absolutely great. You could use a camcorder, but I would advise against it. Digital cameras, DSLR cameras are more than good enough for video, and you can also take excellent pictures with them, which I'll explain a little bit. If you're on a budget, get a good cell phone with a good camera. I like the Samsung. People might like other brands, doesn't matter. But I've been using Samsung Galaxy S phones for years now. Always been very happy with them. Next up is a tripod for your camera. Don't have somebody holding it in their hand. It's going to give you crappy image quality. You need a tripod. I've got a list. I've got one that I mentioned in the show notes that I think will work well. It's decent quality, and you can actually use that one either for a digital camera, or you can also buy a very cheap cell phone mount, which is something you attach on top of it, and that holds your cell phone if that's what you're using. Works quite well. Now, for lighting, again, avoiding shadows and having good lighting, very important. There's something called soft boxes, which is basically LED lights that are behind a translucent or transparent screen, and they give this warm light. It's what I'm using right now. So I use Falcon Eyes, there's other brands, but that's what I'm using right now. And I put a link to the exact model that I'm using right now. They're older, not that expensive anymore in my opinion, but they're quite good. Been using them for years, no complaints. If you're on location, don't forget power. You're going to need power for the lighting, for your computer, for a lot of stuff. Okay, extension cords. I've always brought them with me on a shoot, and it was more than helpful. Bring all the props that you need: gloves, weapons, kicking shield, and so on. Food and water, because you're going to be there for a long time. You're going to be talking a lot, so your voice might go. And if you have a cameraman, that would be even better. If not, I've done this repeatedly. I would make an instructional video. I would hit the record button, go walk in front of the camera and start recording the scene. So it's a lot of work, but it's perfectly possible. So this is a list of some of the stuff that you need for equipment. You can do it with less, you can buy a whole lot more, but this is what I'm doing right now. So then you have a better idea. All right, now we get to the big part first, that most people wanted to hear about is an actual recording. So you hit the record camera, on the camera. Okay, before you do that, I want you to test the wide shot area first. What does that mean? Well, you aim the camera in front of the background that you're going to use, and then you want to make sure that you put tape on the floor, or you can use a marker pen to put an X on the floor, and that shows you, and somebody's going to have to help you with that, how far to the left, to the right, to the front, and to the back that you can step before you go out of frame. When people stop seeing your feet or your head or your arms, when you go either too much to the sides or forward or backwards. Do that first, mark it clearly. It's possible to use, for instance, gaffer tape or just basic plastic tape or some sort of black marker or whatever that marks these spots on the floor without it picking up on the camera too much. So that's what they did with Paladin Press. You had the X marked the spots on the blue mats, and the camera couldn't see the X unless you basically did a close-up. But I could know where I needed to stand and how far I could go. If you have a cameraman, the cameraman will turn the camera, but that is a skill that takes training and time as well. So test the area that you can work in first and stay in it when you record your scenes. Speaking of scenes, don't talk too fast or too slow. Speaking too fast, speaking too slow, it doesn't work. No, nobody likes to listen to somebody like that. Now, don't whisper, but also don't yell. It's incredibly annoying when you see instructional videos that were taped, for instance, in a gym, where there's a lot of background noise and the instructor is yelling at the camera because he thinks otherwise the camera won't pick up what I'm saying because of all the background noise. Now, I get that, but that doesn't work. Nobody wants to listen to 2 hours of that and watch 2 hours of that, of somebody screaming at the camera. Again, this is why you practiced. So you know what kind of volume you need and what kind of tone you need. If you're not used to this, pretend that you're teaching a private class or a seminar. What does that mean? Well, imagine that there's somebody watching you right then and there, and you have to explain the technique as if they're a beginner. That means that you don't assume, but you know what the viewer will see. You don't assume, well, they'll just figure out that I'm using my left hand. No, you know what the viewer will see because you've practiced, you've recorded yourself, and you've watched, okay, in this technique here, I have to turn a little bit, or I have to tell folks, look at my left hand. This is going to the elbow, and my right hand is doing this and that, and so on. So don't just assume they'll figure it out. That's not going to give you a quality product. There's something what I like to call the dark side of the moon, and that means that when it's necessary, you want to switch positions with your partner. If you're standing on the left, you go over to the right side, and he goes to the left side where you were. Why? The camera is facing you. It's two-dimensional. People can't look behind you. So if you're standing with your right side facing the camera, your left side, your left hand is not going to be all that visible. So if there's something important happening with your left hand, you're going to have to turn around and face the other side so that people can, when they watch the video, see what that hand is doing. Or if that's not possible, you're going to have to point out very clearly what that left hand is doing. But I would suggest just shoot it again and show the other side to the camera so people will understand what you're doing. Your body can hide what you're actually doing. Your limbs can be obstructed from the camera by how your body is positioned. So always bear that in mind. If it's not possible, what I sometimes do is I stop working with a partner, I face the camera, and I do the same technique solo. And then I show them, look, this is my left hand, this is what it's doing while I'm working with my camera, with my partner, sorry, and the camera can't pick it up. And then you show it again with a partner. So that's a little trick that you can do as well. Sometimes the sideways view and the frontal view, so the camera looking at you and your partner, or you standing in front of the camera facing it, that doesn't work. Sometimes like a 45-degree angle for the camera so that you're off at 45, both of you, that can work better. But don't overdo it because it's annoying to watch and for a long time. Another tip, show and tell. Very often I will point with my finger what I want people to pay attention to, so that they don't miss that important detail. And I also tell them explicitly, for instance, watch my right foot now. I'm going to put it right next to his left foot, blah, 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 and then you keep going. So you can show, you can tell, unlike in writing, in good fiction writing, you will not necessarily tell the reader everything that you want to know. You will imply a lot of stuff. In video, you can tell clearly what's going on and point to what you think they should be looking at, as opposed to just letting them figure it out by themselves. That's not good instructional material. Now, two more points. One, have consistent energy. You'll notice that this podcast is fairly long, and I'm speaking at pretty much the same tone. Why is that important? Well, if you don't have consistent energy, your shoot can be all day long. It can be several days. When I shot with Paladin Press, we would start in the morning, 8:30, maybe even a little bit sooner or later, depending on context, but not that late. And then we would go for maybe until 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, with no real breaks. In between scenes, you can drink some water, eat an energy bar, and then I would go again, non-stop. Because if we stop for lunch and we break, everybody's tired while they're digesting their food. So you can spend a long, long time shooting your video. And if you're all hyped up in the first hour and speaking very energetically and so on, but that was 9 a.m. in the morning and now it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon, you're tired and you're speaking a lot slower, and maybe you're not standing up straight anymore and the volume of your voice goes down, you're getting hoarse. The people who buy your video, they won't know when that scene is taken. And they might see these two scenes, the one in the morning, the one at 5 p.m., in the space of about an hour apart. So they're going to see a video at first where you're very energetic, and then like 45 minutes later, an hour later, in watching your video, they see a tired instructor standing there. So instead of having this hyped up energy, overly enthusiastic, have consistent energy. So it's something that you can sustain for the entirety of the shoot. And then finally, last thing you do when you've finished with the curriculum of your outline, do a 10 to 15 minute photo shoot for the artwork that you're going to use to sell your videos, for thumbnails, for banners, for promotional material. Just do that. Have that planned out as well. Very important. Okay, so this is a lot of information. Gonna probably want to listen to this podcast again. But for now, I'm going to keep going because it's important we get to the editing part. You finished recording, so now you can edit the footage and make it into an actual product that you can sell. Many different ways you can go about it. A lot of software. I like Cyberlink's Power Director. I've been using it for a long time. It's a subscription model now, so it costs $50 a year. You get updates every month, and it's easy to use for beginners, but there's also powerful features in there that when you go beyond the basics, you can actually do pretty good work. There are free programs out there. I haven't used them in a long time, so I can't really recommend any. But Power Director is quite good. There's a lot of tutorials also available online to do the basics first, and you'll very quickly be able to get the hang of it. I recommend it. I like it a lot. What is the overall structure of an edited video? You start with a title, then you have an introduction, you have chapters and subchapters, and these are made up out of scenes. You have a conclusion in the end, and then you have credits. In between all these, for the chapters and sub-chapters, you might have some title screens as well, but not necessarily so. That's overall it. Don't go overboard with title screens, but people have to be able to follow along and understand, like, okay, this is the first part, now we're doing something else. If there's no title screens, if there's just this one uninterrupted flow of you talking for an hour on end, it's going to be hard to follow. It's also going to be hard to watch something specific again later on if you don't have chapters and sub-chapters. When somebody says, okay, I want to watch this thing again that you showed about how to use a straight punch in this situation, and they haven't watched your video in over a year, and if they have to scroll through, an hour or 2 hours of video footage until they find it, they're going to get annoyed. So you want to have a table of contents when you start your video, and you want to have chapters so they can immediately jump to at 45 minutes and 30 seconds. That's where you talk about that punch. So that's why structure and editing matters. Now, when it comes to scenes, and that's basically a segment of, can be very short, can be several minutes, where it's basically you showing whatever you're showing. You want to avoid long unedited scenes as much as possible. Now, I have strayed from that, I know, especially my earlier work, but overall, I like to have a hard limit of 5 minutes. Don't have 5 minutes of unedited footage, because it's boring to watch after a while, no matter how good it is what you're doing. So try to avoid that. What you can do is use transition effects. I use that a lot. So you have, basically you're showing this straight punch again, and it's filmed from in one specific way, in which you're on the left side of the screen, your partner on the right, and then you stop recording and you switch sides and you show it from the other side. You are now standing on the right, your partner on the left. Well, that's 2 video files that you recorded. You put them in your editing software and you do a transition, so that for instance, I like to use a fade transition. The one scene fades and it flows into the next one. And if you use a smooth transition, it's imperceptible. People are used to that and they can keep on watching. There's no wasted time. Don't waste time every time, you walking to the other side and your partner walking to where you stand and then squaring off again and starting over. That's going to be boring to watch as well. It happens sometimes, but try to avoid that. Speaking of these kinds of effects, don't do fancy stuff. Don't add special effects. Don't add sound effects. Don't do it. It looks silly after a while, and it gets old very, very quickly. Keep things simple. Keep things clear. That is so much better. Now, you can zoom in where appropriate. It doesn't have to be just always this wide shot of just showing you and your partner from head to toe. You can zoom in certain portions, but you want to do it where it's appropriate. Now, as I mentioned, this is why you film in 4K. So that when you zoom in, you're going to lose pixels, you're going to lose definition. But if it's 4K, you will still have, in the end, a full HD video when you produce the final file. And you can zoom in software, in the video editing software, and get specific parts that you want. So that makes a huge, huge difference. That's why 4K is, most cell phones, for instance, can do this very easily. Do it. You need a lot of memory, maybe in your phone. Maybe you need a micro SD card to put in your phone. You might have to back up on an external hard drive, all those files. Yeah, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Nobody wants to see crappy video. As a final point, some projects, you want to do voiceover. So some instructional videos, they work better when there's no sound while you're recording. So you can mute the sound, and then you use voiceover to add explanations. I want to caution you, this is not for beginners, because you have to plan everything meticulously and really know how much time you need to talk about something and what you will shoot video-wise. But it can work very well. For instance, I have a membership site, online-taichichuan.com, and that is what I do there. I shoot videos, and then I use voiceover in the video editing software with a good microphone to talk and explain what I'm teaching. And I put a link to the microphone that I'm using. I think it's really good. So now you've got, in the end, you have a finished video. You have a video file. Okay, how do you sell it? Well, first off, you're going to have to use artwork. Artwork is basically, at the very minimum, a cover. I use Canva right now. It's free. There's a paying version, but it's a free web software that you can use to create images and covers and a lot of other stuff. And if you need some inspiration, go to bjjfanatics.com, where there's a lot of instructional material on grappling, on striking, strength training, and so on. They have a very specific style of making covers. You don't have to copy it specifically, but it gives you an idea of a style of covers. To make a cover, you need good pictures. That's why we did a video shoot at the end, a picture shoot at the end of the video shoot. You need a title, maybe a subtitle, your name. That's the absolute minimum you put on there. Back in the time when there was DVDs, you had to have a back cover as well. You don't need that anymore. If you want to do DVD, good luck. I sold one DVD in the last, I think, 3 to 4 years. So I don't do it anymore. It's more hassle than it's worth. So you've got your artwork, right? Where will you sell? This is a point of contention. I've been in this business for many years. I've seen a lot of outfits come and go. What you want is reliable partners. Think of it as a marathon and not as a sprint. So you don't want to spend time, energy with a partner that turns out that in a few years, the company is not doing great. They get bought out by this other company, they merge, and all of a sudden everything changes and you're not happy anymore. What do I recommend? I work with Vimeo. I use a pro level, and that gives me, I think it's, 20 gigabytes a week that I can upload. I can sell videos on there. It's not that cheap. I think it's like $15 a month. But if you think that you might be able to sell a lot of videos, it's more than well worth it. Now, I use it also for my Patreon videos, so I need that 20 gigabytes a month easy. But I can upload really big video files and sell them via Vimeo. It's streaming. You can offer it as a download. I would suggest not doing that. I would suggest offering streaming with all the pirating that goes on. Not everybody agrees with that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You do you, but I am not really a fan of downloadable videos all that much. Now, if you don't like Vimeo, you can go with Amazon. There's Prime Video Direct, which I also use, and they're good. Amazon is the biggest marketplace around, so it's worth it, I think. However, they have very specific requirements for video files and artwork. The interface isn't easy to work with, in my opinion, but it's worth it to be in the catalog, I think. There's also another caution. They want you to include a closed captioning file. I use rev.com for closed captioning, and it's basically you have to upload your video. I would suggest using a low resolution version of the video. They only need the audio and the time codes. So in your video editing software, you make a full HD video file. That's what you will upload to the sellers. You make a very low resolution one with a really crappy image that you use for to upload to the closed captioning service. They will then send you a file that you can upload to Prime Video Direct at Amazon to basically have the subtitles ready. It's not that complicated, but something that Amazon demands. So one more hurdle to jump over. These are the ones that I use, and again, I'm not going to talk about membership sites. That will be for a specific episode. I use Gumroad for that. But right now, these are the two that I would recommend because they're reliable. We can talk about their business practices, but that's not my point here. You could use YouTube, you could use Facebook. For me, they are not reliable. I'll explain more when we talk about making money on social media. but I would advise against YouTube and Facebook, primarily if these will be your only selling platforms. Well, that's it. This is the meat and potatoes of making instructional videos and making earning some money with that. If you can make a living, that's even better. That takes marketing. Marketing is for a later episode. I'm not going to talk about it now. But in conclusion, what I would like to say is that you're going to have to maybe re-listen to everything again. For sure, go to the show notes page on my blog page so that you can find all the links of the stuff that I mentioned. Again, it's a lot. And you have some thinking to do and some figuring out like, okay, what do you want to do? Where do you want to take all this? Are you sure you want to make the video like this? Are you sure you want to make it 5 hours long? And so on. So you've got a lot to consider. The main message is that it's going to take practice. And it takes a lot of practice to be good instructing on video. Not everybody can do it right away. Some people are born communicators. That wasn't me for sure. Some people are really bad at it, no matter how long they train. A lot of it has to do with trying to improve your performance once a camera is on. And that is something you continuously work on. As if you want to sell videos, that is. If you don't care, well, that's fine. If you think you're so awesome that you don't need to improve, well, vaya con Dios, good luck to you. I can only wish you the best, but I think it's doubtful that's going to happen. Again, unless, again, I like to take Gordon Ryan because he's a high-profile guy. He sells a lot of videos. He sells them, they're not cheap. I think, content, the amount of content you get is worth it, but it's not like you can get them for $10. And he's a controversial figure. A lot of people hate his guts, but he can make it work. So, for the record, I don't hate his guts at all. I don't mind at all. He's a character, but he's doing great. So good for him. But I mean, if that's not you, it's certainly not me. Try to offer the best possible quality with your instructional video that you can. And that takes preparation and knowledge and some experience. And I hoped that I gave you a lot of the information you need to get started on that path. As a final point, a good way to view all this is you have the rest of your life to recoup the costs, the investment that you do for the equipment and so on. You can have the rest of your life to recoup that investment by selling your videos. I have videos that have been out for a long time, for many years, that still sell. Not as good as they used to in the beginning, obviously. Everything has a shelf life. And at a certain point, the people who are interested in your stuff, they've bought it. So you're going to have to make new videos. But that's how it works. And then bit by bit, you can actually have a video catalog of products that you made that offer high quality material and that people eventually know that when you bring something out, it's high quality, it's good. The content is good, the way it's filmed is good, the sound is good, and they can rest assured that they won't regret buying it. Every now and then somebody will say like, he used to be good, but not anymore. But at the very least, you will have done your absolute best to give the highest possible quality and both in the way that everything looks and sounds and also the information in that video. And with that, I'm going to leave you. Do check out the other episodes. I'm going to list a few episodes talking about earning a living and making money with martial arts and self-defense. The previous ones, that's going to be in the show notes. And also, we've got some fun guests to look forward to. My friend Monty Guthrie, I will record the episode with him talking about being a bouncer during COVID and a bunch more. That's going to be recorded soon. And I talked to Tammy Yard McCracken, 500 Rising, Violence Dynamics, and more. She will be on the podcast too. It's going to be recorded later this month. I've got a bunch more guests in the works, so I hope you guys will enjoy that too. As always, hit the like button, share, subscribe, and if you do want to support the work that I do, what helps the most is join me on Patreon. starts at $3 a month with a lot of content there already because I've been going there for 5 years. And this month in December is Q&A month. So I'm doing a lot of quick Q&As, 10, 15 minutes. People ask questions and I answer them, and you can watch those videos for free. Well, that's it, guys. Everybody, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.